So, our next keynote speaker, Jorge Moll, very important Brazilian neuroscientist. I would say that he had, I think all of us that are concerned with moral responsibility, agency, moral decision making, in a given moment of our lives, came across his paper on donations. That was like very groundbreaking, very important paper. I mean, he's the main brain after the IDOR Institute in Rio de Janeiro, which has like a level of quality of production that has nothing else to present than excellent work. And I would say there is an institute here in the city of Rio de Janeiro that is at the same level of any good institute abroad. And it is a pleasure to receive him among us. And the word is all yours, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Gabriel. Thank you for you and the organizers. Oh, I have to. My phone is talking to me. How do I? Yeah. How reverberation. Yeah. Okay, I have to go back. Sorry, guys. It's a spoiler. Oh, the whole stuff. Oh. So you've seen everything, all right. So I'm going. Sorry for that. Okay, I got this right quickly. That's good. So I can move fast. So the plan is to cover briefly, but a number of topics that connect one to the other. It's a little kind of a 20-year, 25-year travel on our research program, which started on. Okay, let me do this. Okay, better? Yes. So I plan to give you a kind of a summary of the main topics related to moral decision making, emotions, and finishing a little bit with a passion that I had as a kid, which is AI. I never went into that place. I'm not a computational neuroscience or nothing like that, but I used to read Marvin Minsky and read a lot of science fiction, Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke, Philip K. Dick. There'll be a little bit of that too. So the plan is to provoke and open some questions in this connection interface. Okay, so this is an outline that I plan to cover: the neuroscience of emotions and reward, cognition. Then address like the functional imaging, which has been most of the work we've done along these 25 years or so. Speak a little bit about real-time neuroimaging. We dedicated a lot of effort to that, for during almost 10 years. And then come back to moral judgments and connect it to AI and ethics. And then summarize a few points for discussion. So basic question that was out there when I was starting with moral judgments was back in 99, 98, there was this tension between rationality and emotion. There was also a tension about philosophy and neuroscience. And I remember well some of our first papers we submitted for publication, and one of the reviews wanted to kill the paper because he said that morality is a topic that does not belong to neuroscience, it belongs to philosophy. So that was like 25 years ago, a little less. And here we are, right? It's so interesting to see how progress works. And sorry. So how emotions and cognition are organized in our brains and how they work together to enable moral judgments. This is a question for the end. Will AI faithfully mimic human cognitive and emotional interactions, including moral judgments, which, some of us believe is one of the pillars of human evolution, is the ability to concoct moral judgments, to assemble very complex information about people, about values, about theories, and be able to make such kinds of judgments, right? And if AI will ever able to do that, is that only based on information processing, or do we have to recur to more esoteric concepts like qualia and stuff like that? Well, I always like to start with this because moral judgments did not come out of the blue in our species. It was a long and painful process of the evolving brain cooperation, solving problems in nature. So we're not alone in making these kinds of judgments, but of course, in a very far way, as you see from our cousins, other primates. So, for example, in non-human primates, there's a nice book by Franz de Waal. Unfortunately, I think he passed away recently. And so primates, non-human primates, are able to cooperate. They have food sharing codes. They have reciprocity codes, and so on. Our species diverted now for all the primates about 6 million years ago, and there are so many species during our evolutionary story. And at some point, apparently there were like 30 of those living at the same time, which is striking things. Like, it's incredible to think that we have very similar cousins, walking on the first of layer, killing each other, and that's our history. That as tragic and as beautiful as it can be. So our current version, like the Homo sapiens, apparently emerged like 150 to 100,000 years, which is very little time ago, right? And that was accompanied by the huge increase in brain capacity, based on a very simple metric, the size of the brain, right? So there is no question that the size of our brain and its arrangement, connectivity, was a fundamental issue, fundamental aspect that underlies our cognitive and emotional capacities. So these ornaments and such are found in caves. They were perhaps the most paleoanthropological important evidence that we care about things which are not only reproduction and not only fighting each other. There is something else that emerged, something very strange that emerged during our evolutionary history. Now, today, we have these wonderful tools that allow us to image the brain, to do things that our colleagues, our behavioral neurosciences colleagues used to do, sticking needles and cutting brains of our, other mammals, other species. But then with imaging, with functional imaging, this emerged as an incredible tool for us to do experiments in humans, and at the end of the day, be able to validate what we observe in brain lesions, in behavioral disorders arising from brain lesions, but looking at the living brain. I would like to start here with the topic of rewards and immediate self-interest, right? So this is kind of a modern type of reward, which can be addictive. But there are a number of classes of rewards that are important for survival, that tap on very basic emotional and reward processes in the brain. Now, since the 50s, we discovered that there are parts of the brain, like the mesolimbic system, which is so crucial, so central. It's like a common currency for reward in the brain. This discovered by Olds and Milner was so important because it showed that rewards can be delivered directly by stimulation in this area, and animals and humans could, it's so powerful. You can give away any other types of rewards to receive stimulation in this region. So this is very powerful and very dangerous. That's exactly what happens with drug addiction. However, okay, before that, so brain imaging, not surprisingly, started to explore these. And a very powerful way to explore these circuits in humans is using money, right? Using primary rewards too, like tastes and smells. But money is a very interesting and reliable way of manipulating rewards. So tons of studies published that gave rise to a whole area called neuroeconomics, which learned a lot from behavior economics and neuroscience. Tons of papers being published in this area. Very creative research. I'd like to cite here Brian Knudsen, a good friend from Stanford. He did the very first study at the NIH in 2001, showing the money spot in the brain. Now, the beautiful thing about us, we humans, that we care about much more abstract, not only abstract, but much more complex values, right? And what different classes? Art, for example. How can one explain this, the power of art in our brains? Or sports, like the Brazil soccer team. This is something so interesting because it doesn't enhance your survival fitness, nothing like that. It still care a lot about these things: religion, values, music, and so on, so on, so on. So we really think that the development in the brain that allowed us to care about these things is kind of a very overlapping on our capacity to feel moral emotions and to make moral judgments. And how can we define? Morality can be defined in several ways, but one easy way is to call this a sets of customs and values adopted by individuals and societies to guide social behavior. As you see, this is very culturally driven. There are many commonalities across cultures, of course, from evolution and so on, but they are very specific also to subcultures. All of those require something we call the moral motivation. So the ability to be motivated by social cultural norms and people's needs. Without this, we would be just machines that can, compute things. So moral behavior requires the knowledge about the needs of others, say social knowledge, social norms, specific social cultural aspects, but also requires our ability to be motivated to behave in such ways, right? So these two components are so important. We were very inspired since the beginning of our research by Adam Smith. Actually, I cite my thesis, my doctorate thesis, the Theory of Moral Sentiments, which is a fantastic book by Adam Smith. And he calls sympathy the mother of all emotions, all morality, which is it's a beautiful concept. And moral emotions have been explored by tons of psychologists, social psychologists. Of course, this dates back to the philosophers, 3,000 years ago. But the systematic exploration of moral emotions started like many decades ago. So this is a little summary. Moral motivations can be tied to, it can be evoked by, experimentally speaking, by social actions in specific contexts. For example, this is a kind of probe stimuli that we've used for functional imaging studies. So your mother calls one night telling that she was not feeling well. You do not take her seriously, and the next day she died, right? So we can say that 80% of the people in the Brazilian sample specifically say that they would feel guilt in that circumstance. And that's pretty good. You can also, instead of describing events, you can describe abstract moral values. For example, that's what my colleague Roland Zahn has been used in his theory of social concepts. You act dishonestly towards your best friend. You don't have to say exactly what, but you can, if you imagine a situation like that, you can feel guilt as well. So you can use different pathways to evoke specific emotions. Guilt is just an example here. Just one study we published a while ago showing that certain moral emotions, they share some functional features. For example, in this case, guilt, but also compassion, a situation that describes you caring about someone who's suffering. Both of them activate this middle area you see there, which at the time we thought that this area would be the ventral striatum, right? The reward spot in the brain. But later we discovered that this is actually, it's a region that abuts the septal region, the subgenal septal area. And you see why this is so important. So both guilt, compassion share this aspect here, as compared to indignation, for example. This is a contrast with indignation. Now, from feelings to motivations, so decision-making and self-regulation, this is the obvious thing. One, how do you derive your yes or no decisions in relation to certain decision behaviors based on your reasons and your underlying emotions? That's a study we published using the same kind of design. In this case, they are patients with frontotemporal dementia, which is a disorder that is characterized by degeneration of the frontal and temporal lobes. These patients, contrary to typical Alzheimer's patients, they don't present with memory failures, things like that, but they present with behavioral disturbances, especially social behavioral disturbances, which can be very dramatic. It's very sad too, because most families, this 60-year-old, 70-year-old start to behave very inappropriately, and there is an immediate moral judgment on that, right, from the families, because why he's doing that? He's being inappropriate. It's actually his brain is failing in these regions. So we applied the same kind of task. We call a moral sentiment judgment task, and we showed that they start to they mix up. They are not able to point to situations where they should feel or they would feel guilt or compassion or indignation. They mix up these things. And these things that look like activations, they are actually statistical decreases in PET for the deoxyglucose metabolism. So it decreased metabolism in the frontopolar cortex and in the septal region. So I should say the frontopolar cortex, as you see more in the head, is one of the most recently developed regions of the human brain. It's very important for perspective evaluations. It allows you literally to travel into the future. So you think a situation, you think about the consequences, the long-term consequences. Frontopolar cortex is absolutely essential for that kind of processing, because it stores representations that enable emotions to be combined with the simulated scenarios in the future. So you see here, the decrease in guilt, the bigger impact on guilt and pity or compassion, as seen in the septal region, but in the frontopolar cortex, embarrassment is also compromised. So the septal region seems to be more specific for these kind of affiliative emotions. Okay, moving on. So that's the study Gabriel mentioned. I love that study too. That was my postdoc project at the NIH. And the question there was, can we use the typical decision-making paradigms using money inside the scanner to test altruism, to have people receiving money and then anonymously making decisions to donate money to organizations or refrain from doing so and keeping the money. So there are a number of conditions there, not going into the details, but basically what we saw is when we receive money, there was a self-reward condition. No wonder you activate the reward system, say the VTA, ventral tegmental area, and the striatum, regions which are very rich in dopamine. And these regions also light up when you donate money to charity. So that's a commonality. Now, if you compare donations to receiving money, what's the difference? Then it's the second picture you see there. The subgenual SG and the septal area are very specific when you are making altruistic donations. That's the difference you see between. And then when the decisions are hard, so you're donating at a high cost, which was one of the conditions there, then you see the third picture here, the frontopolar cortex, which does this complex weighting across alternatives, behavioral alternatives, lighting up there more strongly. That became a piece in The Economist, the joy of giving. One interesting point I always like to highlight is the media, the press, love to tell the story. Many papers came after this using similar designs, and the story is always the same. Oh, it's good to give and you feel pleasure. So there is also like an implicit moral evaluation on that, saying, oh, you only do good things because you feel a reward inside yourself, like the warm glow feeling. And I personally don't like this because, although it's not bad to feel good when you do good, what's the problem? But it's not only that. So there are circuits which are important for social attachment, which are exactly the subgenual septal area. It's actually the bonding part of we could call it love. It's the part that really makes the connection, not only between people, but with principles too. So the idea here is that we evolved the same regions that allow us in other mammals to bond within species or kinship. We had kind of reused those circuitry to allow us to connect to very abstract principles, ideologies, soccer teams, so on, so on, so on, so on. That's a paper where we with Vietnam vets, we look at a statistical distribution of lesions. And we could show that using a similar donation task, that we find kind of similar regions that lead to increase or decreased punishment and donation to third parties. So it's another study. It's a very complicated study, so I won't spend time with that. But regions that increase donation and decrease donation, and same thing for altruistic punishment. So summarizing the moral brain, which are the main regions that have been involved in moral decisions, in moral emotions, and so on. So the typical, everybody knows, like the gauge brain, the gauge figure here, Finn's gauge, like frontal lesions. Not always, but many times they do lead to poor planning, lack of foresight, impulsivity, loss of flexibility, and poor social judgment. So one important thing is that it does not lead typically to sociopathy, right? So the sociopath, a psychopath. It leads to impaired behavior, impaired planning, and therefore, normally it's associated with poor social control, right? Of course, there are combinations. Some patients actually develop very bizarre behaviors, but normally it's more on this ability to project in the future. The temporal lobe, especially the anterior temporal lobes, these regions, when compromised, they can lead to, yes, very bizarre changes in behavior. But the posterior regions, like the STS, superior temporal sulcus, they affect more the complex social perception, social attributions, and things like that. It's the temporal poles that actually lead to emotional disorders. And finally, one region that we would like to emphasize, because at the time when we started to publish these studies, it was completely overlooked, was the subcortical regions. The subcortical regions are the seat of these very deep emotional capacities, right, including attachment. So without capacity for attachment, you can make moral judgments, you can do everything, but you will not behave in a decent way, let's call it this way. You're incapable of having your motivation to care for others. That includes a number of regions, but to emphasize this subgenal septal region, which are very rich in oxytocin receptors and vasopressin and so on. So that's a region that has to work together with the cortical structures to enable moral sentiments and so on. So moral cognition and emotion rely in cortical subcortical integration, and this is a review we published like many years ago with a very systematic reviewing of lesion data. It's very important to emphasize that lots of functional imaging data that don't pay attention to lesions. Like we know that fMRI can show that the regions that are engaged in a given task, but it does not show the regions of the brain which are necessary for a given task. So we put together this review, and I think it's still pretty much up to date in the sense of what is the moral brain, which are the regions that are important for different aspects and features of moral emotions and moral judgments. More recently, we kind of dissected more into this very kind of a more mysterious region of the subgenal cortex and the septal regions. So this is a very detailed anatomy paper on these regions, segmenting these regions. So those who are interested in more the anatomical aspects, here's a good reference. Oh, enters AI. Okay, let's talk a little bit about this. Remember this? Who remembers Blade Runner 1982? So it's funny because the old generation, all of us watched Blade Runner multiple times, and I really encourage you, the youngsters, to watch that. It's based on a fiction novel by Philip K. Dick, which is Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? It's a treatise of moral philosophy, I guess, and neurotechnology. So that's Blade Runner. So I'm going to play just a little piece of the movie here.
I'm Rachel.
Deckard.
It seems you feel our work is not a benefit to the public.
Replicants are like any other machine. They're either a benefit or a hazard. If they're a benefit, it's not my problem.
May I ask you a personal question?
Sure.
Have you ever retired a human by mistake?
It's incredible, isn't it? It tells everything. We're going to face this very soon, right? These intelligent machines are coming. They will show emotions. We will be convinced that they are feeling, although they might not, or they might be, who knows? And we're going to face very strange situations very soon, I guess. So, talk a little bit about empathy, consciousness in AI and organoids. So there's before that, inspired on that movie, we asked this question: can we use like sophisticated image processing, real-time imaging, like the Voight-Kampff test in the Blade Runner movie? Can we detect and change such moral emotions in the human brain. So that was kind of a challenge that we took 10 years ago, a little bit more. And can we teach people to self-regulate brain activity associated with these emotions? Basically, the question is, are humans able to modulate their own neural responses arising from social emotions or moral emotions as a way potentially to boost empathy, right? So we developed a tool which is free to use. It's called Friend. It allows you to do like a region of interest, real-time processing, but also machine learning, those multiple regions working together and classifying the patterns and giving feedback to the individual. So, and then we ran a couple of studies, and what we could show is that this pattern recognition and ROI, region of interest base, can be used to infer psychological states and to deliver neurofeedback. So, brain decoding and neurofeedback. The idea is in this study was to discriminate between two high-level emotions, tenderness and self-pride. The two positive, it would be too easy to discriminate a positive from a negative emotion. Then you're actually decoding valence and not a specific emotion. So we took the challenge of to discriminate these two states, self-pride and tenderness, using support vector machines, and then giving our feedback was these rings we see here. Sorry. Yeah, these rings, they were seeing a screen inside the scanner, and the smoother the ring was, the better the pattern corresponded to a pattern of tenderness or pride, depending on the condition, right? And these are the final results. We could show that not for everybody, but from 9 out of 12 participants in the true condition, there was also a control condition where they received random feedback. They were able to self-regulate these regions in the brain. This is kind of the regions. So guess what? Look at the region. There is the septal area showing up there. So the better the decoding was performed, the more activity they showed in the septal area and in the frontopolar cortex there, in the tenderness condition. So that was a successful study. It was fun. It was a lot of work to do this. It was more like showing that's possible. Applying this in real life is a whole different story. How to make this available and how use cases and etc. We did a couple of other studies using more interesting feedback. So in that case, we use Unity, this game platform, to program scenarios. So instead of looking at these rings, you're actually navigating in a beautiful scenario like those, like this open space, and the feedback was actually the color of the environment. And with that, we could also show that you could increase actually the feedback efficiency. Well, now to finalize, to cite a couple of papers on emerging fields, like the emerging field of so-called synthetic biological intelligence, or SBI. So, you've seen in the media, organoids, cell cultures, neuronal cultures. There was a big splash in there saying, oh, are these things conscious or not? Okay, there was a lot of hype in there, but it's a topic that we must face. We have to enter that discussion. I think it's too much of a hype so far, but it doesn't help to ignore. So one of the proposals that if you use in the artificial system, if you combine them with organic systems, and you can possibly create qualia in these things, like if consciousness depends on the material. Now that's a big discussion. The other one is this one, addressing the exponential expansion of this intersection of neuroscience and intelligence, AI, artificial intelligence, brain-computer interface. We saw a little bit of that. And there's the key concepts that have been addressed. So, of course, privacy, agency and identity, augmentation. There's a big potential for neural enhancement. And finally, the potential for bias. Again, the media is full of that, we see. But I think we should take a positive outlook at that, because things can self-correct. Science in general is able to self-correct as long as we don't destroy ourselves, right? We tend to self-correct. Now, the last part, just to provoke a little bit, let's tap on consciousness. What is consciousness, right? Why do we need consciousness? Or do we need consciousness? Why do we need consciousness? I have a question myself. Why aren't we automata? We could be doing all these things we do, right, without being conscious. And this question has not been answered satisfactorily. Or is consciousness just an epiphenomenon? It happened that our systems, sufficiently complex systems, ended up popping up consciousness. Consciousness, subjective clock time, we'll not address that, but it's a very interesting thing. You know that in physics, time is an illusion, like a relativistic physics. Most of the physicists now believe that time is an illusion. It cannot be explained by any of the physics we have today. Therefore, it's kind of an illusion. Like it's entropy playing with our brains, and we perceive time, but it's actually not there. I think it's hard to swallow, but it's a very interesting point. And then awareness in other biological systems, right? So, how are we with time? 5:27? Oh, okay, I'll finish soon. So here are a few questions, right? So the first one we have addressed already. Are cognition and emotion distinctive process or intertwined in moral judgments? For me, it's very clear they are completely intertwined. You can weigh more or the other, but they are completely intertwined. Will AI faithfully mimic human cognitive emotional interactions, including moral judgments? And that relates to the first question, into consciousness as well. So if yes, does it mean that information processing is all there is to human cognitive emotional processes, including moral judgments? Does having qualia of conscious subjective experience differentiate us from AI? Is that a fundamental difference that will help us distinguish ourselves? So is there a boundary that AI cannot cross and to become conscious? And so this is a little exercise. So if you believe that AI will completely mimic the best, our philosophers' capacity to do moral judgments in a very refined way, if we think so, that AI will do this. So this is, do you believe that AI needs to have qualia? So this AI doesn't need to be self-conscious or feel that it's conscious or not. So if not, it will be like a zombie, right? It has all the best cognitive abilities. It can emulate emotions in the middle of that, all the decision process in there. And then we fall into epiphenomenalism, right? Because then these capacity for qualia for us, it just happened. It doesn't need to happen. But more judgments and decisions can be done by machines without having qualia. So we have to think, are we okay with that? With the machine making the best moral judgments and decisions, not being aware of itself or pretending to be aware? Because if you ask, it will say, oh yeah, I am aware, of course, etc. I have a personality, I'm this and this and this and that. Or if yes, if the AI needs qualia to do this, then what's the difference between us and machines? Machines can develop qualia, okay. They might not be exactly the same as we have, but they will have the same rights or similar rights. They can debate with us about this. This is, again, a reality that we might encounter in the not so long in the future. Oh, if we think that AI will not be able to mimic these complex moral judgments, then qualia are essential. If you also think that qualia is essential for moral judgments, and AI does not have moral judgments, then okay, what happens? Implicitly or explicitly, you're saying that qualia has an influence on the physical systems. So you have to accept that there is some non-material aspect of qualia, of consciousness, that in some way interacts with our physical brain and enables us to have qualia, to be conscious. And suddenly we fall on this non-mechanistic. It's incompatible with materialism. I don't know the answer. I have some suspicions. And then if you say also that machines cannot, AI cannot make moral judgments because they don't have the information processing capability, then information processing, yeah, they can do it this way. I would suspect that most of us today would completely discard this one. After ChatGPT and things that are happening, information processing does not seem to be the bottleneck for AI to make such cold moral judgment, let's call it like that. So finally, just to finish, interdisciplinary work is very important across disciplines. That's what we're doing here, actually, neuroscience, psychology, anthropology, computer science. It will be in philosophy and physics, of course. It will be crucial for advancing the field. Refined models of moral motivations, that includes traits, individual differences. There is relatively little work on cultural differences in individual differences, on how we value things, on how we decide about things. This is crucially important too. We need better models for those, otherwise we will not agree. I mean, we have to accept that we do not need to agree a lot of times, which I think it will happen, like when we allow not to agree or to disagree, and that's okay. We disagree and we will not find consilience in a number of topics. To explore AI-based methods for encoding, decoding. Of course, this is a little bit the work us and others initiated. And we need this like a science of human values and meaning, right? This is on the more flourishing aspect. How we understanding these things, we can work on our society as individuals for betterment of our mental health, our relations, and so on, so on, so on. Because at the end of the day, that's where we need. So I wanted to thank you, many colleagues from here, from other institutes in the US, in London, and finish this presentation. Also thanks the funding agencies. Thank you.
Hello. Yes, now it works, I think. I have plenty of questions too, but I'll be a little more elegant this time. I'll be the second. Eddie, please.
We should make sure students get their questions. And are people asking questions online? I never know if there are. But, so great talk, and thank you for all your work on these topics for decades. On the chart where you were laying out the possibilities at the end, that had some nice consilience with what I was talking about this morning, but it sounded like you were saying that you thought qualia had to be non-physical, and I just don't know why you would say that.
Yeah, no.
There's no reason that we should think of the qualitative features of consciousness as requiring something like dualism. So I would just, argue that if we think the AI will need consciousness to be able to make full moral judgments, which seems plausible, and if we think that's in part because qualia and qualitative experiences are necessary, I don't think that will be impossible for us to do in the AI. I don't think we'll necessarily need to bring in a bio feature to them. But who knows? We don't know yet. But we definitely don't need them to have immaterial souls or non-physical processes, I don't think.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I didn't mean to say that. I'm just saying like there are, anyway, as you know well, the jury is out. Some people say supervenience has to, strong phenomenology, phenomenality? No. Yeah. Is it, does the stuff in there explain the emergence of qualia? It could. Now, following the consciousness literature for decades now, and looking at neurotheories of consciousness, in being a neurologist and neuroscientist, I can't see the answer coming from that. I just can't, because you're always going back to, it's spikes, it's all correlational. And then you say, how can you observe, if you observe a human, right? Spikes or an organoid, you look at those spikes and etc. The only thing that allows you to say that structure is sentient is because we are sentient and we attribute that. But spikes and etc. will never tell us if these structures are or not sentient. And as you pointed out, if you're looking at AI systems, computational system, which they don't have spikes, nothing like neurons, but they can provide wonderful answers and emotional things and etc. How will we be able to tell the difference, right? I think that's a big issue.
I hope we don't enter in this discussion about qualia being non-physical, like especially if coming from a neuroscientist, because they will hijack the whole discussion. Let's try to go to. I mean, we can have like not a beer, but rows of beers discussing this thing. Yeah. I hope you have time to come another day too. I want to try to focus on the exactly the brain circuitry that is necessary for the kind of judgments you are dealing with. Especially, I'd like you to focus a little bit on the case of empathy. Yeah, you cited a very beautiful passage from Adam Smith. I mean, there is another Scottish man called David Hume that also has a beautiful quotation saying that that empathy, in his words, sympathy, are the most important sentiment for moral. And I would like to explore this a little bit. How much empathy is necessary for, especially the case you say, like donation or the relationship between tenderness and pride. How much there's a projection of one self to another self, kind of, akin to the Hume quotation, because whenever we focus on moral decision making, we see that there are many areas in the brain, especially like midline areas, they are present there. We also have something related to that. There is how much a common currency, to use the term of economy, is necessary. You show many examples where the frontal polar areas were kind of doing this weighting process. There are many experiments and also some meta-analysis. They also show DMPFC, VMPFC areas. They are trying to, kind of balance the different weights of subcortical and cortical areas influences. So I'd like to see a little bit, how would you explore the relationship of empathy with kind of mediating between the subcortical areas and the very rational processing of frontal areas. I would love if you could explore a little bit of that, because I think this is part of the key,
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. That's I love that question, especially because today I'm a firm believer. I think we have finally debunked something that 25 years ago was really disturbing me. Was the dual process model of cognition and emotion, each one trying to win. That's a complete mistake. The brain is not organized like that. So there's no. Your philosophers use a different expression, like a causal, the reason as a motivation, right? I forgot the term that's used. Like, there's no cognition that can win any kind of a motivation alone. That cognition, if it wins, it's because it's attached to a different emotion or a different motivation. It's not winning by reason alone. It's winning because you judge yourself to be that kind of person, or because you feel that argument is more, solid and gives you confidence. And there's always something, some emotional background on that. So, in addition to that, there are no known long-range suppression pathways in the brain. So if they exist, they're minimal. So they're not like the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex suppressing your amygdala activity. This is a concept that was borrowed from engineering. That doesn't work in the brain. And so there is always like a very fine balance. Of course, you can be using more like cognitive capacity, like working memory or projection in the future. It could be using more of that or less than that. I mean, if you after tons of beers, for sure, your frontal cortex is kind of and you'll be using more immediate heuristics. And that's a fact, right? But then going to empathy. Empathy is a much more complex, construct. There's cognitive dimensions, there's emotional dimensions. But if you just take empathy, okay, on a cognitive dimension, to put yourself on the shoes of the other one, that requires a lot of sophisticated brain processing. In like putting yourself. There's a cognitive aspect. There is a somatic aspect. There are, theory of mind kind of processes that come in that space, sensory, and so on. You have to integrate all these things. And actually, by the way, the origin of empathy was actually German word Einfühlung, right? Einfühlung was like when you look at a beautiful statue and then you feel that you belong into the same nature, you're one and the same. That was like very embodied kind of empathy, which does happen, right? But if we speak about the emotional aspect of empathy, I really think today that it will. I mean, the basis of that, the reduction of this thing is actually something similar to love. It's attachment. It's caring about something. Something becoming part of you emotionally, right? It could be an abstract thing like a political party, or it could be your kid, or it could be something else, right? And that aspect of empathy, if there is no connection, this bonding part, everything will fall apart, including moral judgments. That's my take on that.
When you're talking about love, because there are many recent brain imaging studies around love, and they try to discriminate like what we call early stages of love. That we Brazilians will probably call passion, some paixão, something more brutal. That kinds of hijacks your dopaminergic superhighways to ventral tegmental area and stuff, and you have a more stable sense of love. With each, it's very similar to the relationship between the father, mother to offspring,
Yeah.
right? It's more evolutionary thing, really related to citizen and that kind of stuff. So when you're talking about love, you're probably talking about this kind of more purest love more than kind of romantic love, I imagine. Or both, because they are related, kind of.
I like C.S. Lewis, the four loves, right?
Ah, okay.
So you're covering the whole thing. I think we have now imaging studies about all of them.
Yes.
And they share a lot of dysfunctional anatomy, all of them.
Exactly, yeah.
Of course, the romantic one is very dopaminergic, has this urge thing, and that's So the other ones might be relying more on serotonergic or opioid system.
Exactly,
and
yeah.
things like that,
Okay. Next, please.
I want to ask about the interdisciplinary studies because can we say the brain respond differently depending on the cultural environment the person is? If yes, we need to understand the cultural environment to understand how the brain works. So we need other studies than the biological studies to understand the function of the brain. And the other thing is the society is organized in a way we need human work. But if the AI develop in a way it uh, uh, it it will do the things the human do. It will give a different organization of the society because we will not need anymore the human work. So I think we need to bring the people that study this technology with the people that make public policy, because they know what really is the technology and how to think about the technology, because we will have a different society with no human work, because people will cannot be employed because the technology will do everything. So I want to provoke a little bit the debate, because I am from social science, and I see a distance between these studies in technology in the social way and these more pure studies about AI in a biological way or computational way of view. So I want to ask about how can we bring together the different areas of study to think really think about the thing, because I think we need to study in all ways, but not separately, but all together. So, but my problem is that I don't see this in academy.
Yeah. So you touched on very multiple important spots, but just to address the cultural aspect, I completely agree. And we see even for Western time cultures like here or in urban cities like Rio, Brazil, and go to New York, go to California, etc. There will be different weights on how people value things. For example, we value relationships much more than efficiency. Yeah, this will lead to conflicts all the time. So, yes, we need to understand the cultural specific things. Yes, we need to. In any emergent area of force, there will be a group which is working in a certain place or certain. That will dominate, and it's normal. But to your point, I think there will be lots of interesting tools, like large language models that can be trained or adapted for local societies, for example. So let's do a ChatGPT version sociology in real. Like, definitely there are ways to do this and put these systems to dialogue amongst each other, to validate across with people around. So there is a lot of space for research in there. I think it's actually exciting, and it's addressable. So just to cite one older point, like the theory of values by Schwartz and Bilski, has been done like in 140 countries. There are several commonalities in different societies, but different societies value specific things more than others differently, or they prioritize certain values over the others. So there's a very rich field to be explored, both with social psychology and sociology, anthropology, and AI and neuroscience.
Who else? Questions? Renato.
Thank you, Professor. Great talk. And I'm a big admirer of your work on the neuroscience of ethics and ethical decision making. And I'd like to ask you a practical question, because we have a big practical difficulty in doing fMRI research. And as of right now, all over the world, we're discussing the neuro rights and this regulation, legal regulation of neuroscience. And what I'm really worried about is that, congressmen will impose some kind of limitation to this kind of studies, or at least for us to have access to this kind of, there are some communities that try to share this fMRI studies and this kind of stuff. But how do you feel about this? And what you feel towards open science, and especially in fMRI data, which is sensible, but...
Yeah, that's a great point. So a couple of things about fMRI. First, it's a pain. After being 30 years with fMRI, it's painful, it's costly, and it takes a lot of time to build a team, and you cannot be planned to do 3 or 4 studies and disassemble. It's a very long-term commitment to do that. I speak for myself. I'm doing less fMRI studies in the last years because a lot has been done. So it doesn't help to just produce one more study showing blobs of activation. I think you need to have a very identifiable question where fMRI can tell you something. You just look at it's over. It's the era of looking at correlates. I think it's completely over. Unless you have a correlate or some cognitive thing or some specific emotional taint that you want to explore, it's explored, so not confirmatory. So I see a lot of fMRI studies. I would say most of them, they don't add any information. They're just speaking the same thing, changing words. And it's the same for social psychology and psychological experimental psychology. It's there's too much. We are completely flooded with predatory new journals asking for papers, and this is something very wrong in the system. I think we have to produce less and be much more specific on the questions we ask. And for fMRI, yes, it's very costly, etc. All the things. So I don't expect to have each university. I would say if I had to make that decision, it's a bad investment of resources to every major Brazilian university to invest in fMRI. I think it's better to have few centers collaborating and doing stuff together, designing questions together, and then go and explore with that. It's my feeling.
Yes, thanks a lot for the answer. Who else? Que horas são, Thiago? Savulesco já está na área ou não? Ainda não, então temos tempo. Actually, Professor Savulesco is from Singapore, so it's like 4:30 in the morning there. It's a lot of effort. We're very flattered that he was able to make such an effort to help us out.
Uh, yes, it's more about the outrance problem that you told. If an AI and machine can learn what is to be good, I mean, if a machine can be programmed to do good things, and if a human is naturally humans are naturally rewarded for good actions, can we really employ the debate about altruism? Like it is really altruism in the meaning a machine programmed to do good things. It is really good and in human senses. If humans always get reward for good actions, these good actions are good actions in the meaning of we are spending something, we are exchanging. We are not just doing without receiving anything.
I'm not sure I understood, but if I got your point, is if machines can do good things, of course they do all the time, right? So, for example, if you're driving and you use your brakes, you activate your brakes and you have the ABS feature, right? It works pretty well, and you trust it, right? It's a machine. It's you trust your life with that, right? Everybody does most, and it's a machine working for you. This is going to happen in cognitive systems, and we already do. You know, like airplanes, there are cognitive systems. So of course the pilots are there, but most of the work is done by computers. And I think the big issue is like when we have to trust a machine to make like a moral decision for you, then my suspicion is like knowing or believing that the machine, if it does a mistake, it will not suffer. That's complicated. When we have a human taking the decision, and at least, okay, this is not a psychopath, etc. You trust this person. This person is in charge, taking decisions. But you know there is someone in there. That makes the whole difference before you delegate some very important. Now, as we get used to machines, intelligent machines, making decisions for us, you are comfortable. I'm pretty sure that we are going to forget about this, and the machines will be doing a lot of things that today we call like decisions, and even more decisions today.
Actually, I have another provocation, to be sincere. By the flow of the talk, I mean, somehow you show that some subcortical areas and another areas that are very like emotionally driven are very important for moral decision making. And then you conclude kind of considering there is possible to have, you know, robots or some sort of AI capable also of ethical decision making or moral decision making. That will imply that we need to simulate or to have some sort of emotional processing on those machines. And comes back the question of qualia, because we feel like something when you're in love, when you commiserate of the poor guy asking for money in front of the bakery shop, or in any situation like those where involve in empathy, misericordia, anything like, we have a specific sensation that is strictly related to those lightnings on those areas. So what this will be like in the machine, you know, it's just pre-programmed, or we have to try to replicate what we have on us. That is the most pressing question after the whole flow of your argumentation with your conclusion. They appears as very important, because the way you show things, emotion, I mean, exactly, and your last answer confirms that. I'm not talking about a psychopath or anything like. So a normal processing, a normal emotional processing in any brain implies those correlated feelings. So how is it possible to have moral decision making in robots that, at least to the date, don't have this kind of feelings? So that's something that you have to answer considering your final conclusion. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a great. That's at the core of the. Unfortunately, I missed Eddie's presentation earlier, but I think you talked about this, Roberts, and I'm curious to learn about. But that's the quality of the problem, right? I am pretty sure that we can program these machines or let them build, guide them to build emotional response. All of these emotions we talked about, they can emulate everything, and I think they'll emulate that better than most of us in specific situations. You know, especially with large language models, when they give them sensory systems, they will do it. There's no question, and we will believe that they have it. That's a big issue. We will feel that they have it. They might not have it, or they might have it. So that's, for me, this is a crucial question. Will they, and how we can, I tend to think it's only if we, like Elon Musk, only if you connect ourselves to the machine and we feel, or we have some clue what's going on. Because without that, I see no way. Now, one thing I think is the scariest thing, and it's the most dangerous thing that can be done, which is kind of, I'm also convinced, like, you can endow a machine with what we call motivation, or the will to survive. I think that would be the most dangerous thing to do, because they will behave like that. They will seek for survival, even if they're completely without consciousness. They will have parameters, and they will follow decision pathways to survive, to replicate, and so on, so on, so on. It's not difficult to do that. Solving the cognitive problems that we solve with our the motivational part. I mean, you find this in any primitive animal. It's right there. Even bacteria have that to some degree. So it's possible.
Can we have one more?
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Professor, I was thinking about the fMRIs you've shown, and I would like to hear what's your opinion on using that sort of evidence in court. Like, we are having this discussion. I've seen this discussion in the US, and Professor Eagleman there has been defending the use of that. So what do you think about that? Because I know here in Brazil we are way behind.
Yeah.
But do you think that evidence is enough to justify the behavior of criminals?
I am fascinated by that kind of research, but I think we are very far to have reliable evidence for that application. It's very dangerous. There's so much variation. It's like a cultural variation, individual variability. Until we have this complete, and the effort to do that is still small, right? We need like huge populations, so many variables, cultural things, life histories, and so on, so on, so on, before we can rely on fMRI for court decisions. Yeah, that's what I think.
Okay, big round of applause.